Have a heart, have a heart, have a heart. Hello, everyone. Good to be back for another chat. Our last conversation was about emotional responsibility. I thought that was pretty interesting, but today I wanted to talk about something a little different. It's about focus. And I really wanted to talk about the power and influence of focus. I heard years ago something that really affected me, and it was that we are what we think about all day long. And so my thoughts basically make up who I am. In order for me to live happily in the world and to have success, which is success based on my definition of success, it's really key for me to stay focused on certain things. And the human brain is this amazing organism. It's plastic. It can be shaped, it can be modified by things like what I imagine, what I think about, and what I focus on. And so there is this thing that happens as I continue to focus on certain thoughts or certain images where I develop habits. And so most of the success that I've been lucky enough to have has come from my habits. And there are habits that work for me and habits that work against me. So I was talking to Dave. Dave does all our video and editing right before we started shooting, and he was talking about his workouts and how instead of working out in the last week or so, he's actually been smoking cigarettes. And he's talking about how he's going to stop doing that. And I just think how difficult that can be for people, because once you develop a habit, very hard to break. And the best way that I found to break habits is to replace them with better habits. And the nice thing about the human mind, the human brain, is that because of this thing called neuroplasticity, I can actually do that. I can actually develop brand new habits. The brain is this interesting thing. So the way habits form is very interesting. So I want to talk about what happens when an athlete develops a skill. So let's say that an athlete wants to develop the ability to kick a soccer ball a certain way. So maybe they want to be able to kick from, they're moving to the right, but they want to kick over to the left. Well, so they figure it out visually inside their head, and they see the way that's going to happen. And you can actually learn the skill or develop the habit of doing it a certain way just by imagining it. There was a gentleman who was locked in a Vietnam prison camp for 6 years, and he loved golf, and he thought about playing golf every day for 6 years. He actually took himself through, I believe he did the whole 18 holes of golf in his mind. He was in this, I believe, a 4 foot by 4 foot cell, and he couldn't even stand up. And when he left the US, he had a certain score. And when he came back after these 6 years of being locked up in a prison camp, when he started playing again, his score was much better than it was when he left. And so he did this practice every day in his mind, and it actually improved his ability to perform. And there have been experiments done with, for instance, people shooting free throws in basketball, where there are people that actually practice the free throws, people that didn't do anything, and then people that just imagined shooting the free throws. And what they found is that people that imagined shooting the free throws actually did as well or improved as much or better than people that physically practiced them. And this is a really interesting phenomenon. And so what happens physically in the brain is that when we are operating and developing physical habits, certain parts of the nerve system in the brain develop. And then whenever we practice those same behaviors again, there's this thing called myelin that wraps around the nerve endings where that happens and create insulation. And that insulation becomes thicker the same way there's insulation on a power line that goes from pole to pole. That rubber that's around it is there to keep the electricity from escaping. And so the thicker that rubber is around that line or around like the cable that brings your internet to your computer. The thicker that coating is around that metal that's inside that conducts the signals and the charges, the thicker that is, the better chance that you're going to get the full power of that signal or the power that goes through that line. The same thing happens in our brain, and so myelin begins to wrap around our nerve endings that hold the information about that particular habit. So the more you do it, the more myelin is wrapped around it and the more insulated that habit becomes or that behavior becomes. So the difficult thing is once we've practiced a behavior for a very long time, it's very difficult to eradicate that behavior or make it become extinct because we've insulated that habit or that behavior so strongly. But we do have some things that we can do about that. One of the things that we can do is we can start learning other habits, develop more nerve endings, and then wrap myelin around those by practicing those more and more and more. So I like the idea of replacement. When we focus on, for instance, a habit like smoking, say we wanted to quit smoking. Trying to quit smoking is exactly the wrong thing to do if you want to stop smoking. The thing you probably want to do is practice being a non-smoker, because the human mind doesn't understand the difference between quitting smoking and smoking. So if I'm a smoker and I smoked for years, and it's been about 20 years since I smoked a cigarette. But what I realized is that every time I tried to quit smoking, I failed. But as soon as I decided to become a non-smoker, I was successful and didn't smoke again for decades. Because there's a difference in the way the mind looks at the perception. If I smoke cigarettes and I say I'm going to quit smoking, my mind is going to have this little battle with me that says, you're a smoker, you can't quit smoking. But if I say I'm a non-smoker, then my mind goes, am I? And it asks a question and leaves an opening for me to have success. One of the other cool things about how we focus is in the brain we have this thing called the reticular activating system. And so the human mind acts like a guided missile. And the way a guided missile works is it doesn't find a target, lock onto it, and follow it precisely. What it does is it follows it and then it recognizes whether it's on track or not, and then it corrects. And so it'll swing back, but when it swings back, it'll probably swing too far, and so it's going back and forth like this while it's following the target until it finally hits the target. And so it's looking for something, and our reticular activating system is very interesting. Let's say I go out to buy a car. So I bought a Kia Soul. About 7 years ago, I bought this Kia Soul. 2012, nice little Kia Soul. And when my daughter suggested I buy it, and I thought, that's not my kind of car. You know, I drive a different kind of car, but she thought it would be a good car for me. She had one, it's my daughter, so I thought, oh, it'd be nice to have the same car as my daughter. So when she told me about it, I started driving down the road. Now, I never really noticed these cars before, but suddenly I noticed every Kia Soul that went by. And what was happening is my reticular activating system had become alerted to this thing. And if you notice in your life, what happens is when you start thinking about something, you'll notice it in the environment where if you weren't trying to focus on it, you may not notice these things at all, although they're in the environment all the time. And so there's a challenge with the way we think, our habits and our focus that goes like this. If I focus on things that aren't working, my mind will direct me to all the things that aren't working, and that will guide my behavior. And that's what I'll see in the environment because my reticular activating system will take me to the things that aren't working. But if I focus on the things that are working, or if I focus on things that are the good side of the problems that I have, then that's what I'm going to see in my environment. I was in a meeting this morning, and one of the gentlemen that was in the meeting had a really difficult experience with somebody he was working with where we were not able to live up to a particular commitment that we made to them, and the person he talked to got really upset with him. And for him, this is the worst possible thing that can happen. And so he started talking about all of these other things that weren't going well because that's where his mind was focused. And when I listened to what he was saying, I thought, wow, this is wonderful that this has happened, because this is going to help me to get leverage over the people that I work with so that they will change what they do so that we don't run into that problem again. Because my reticular activating system has become habituated to looking for solutions that grow out of the problems that show up for me. And so that's what I focus on. And if I didn't focus on that, I would focus on failure all the time, because success is filled with failure. I've learned that the most successful people actually fail the most. And they build up it's not a thick skin, I wouldn't say it's that. It's an understanding that failure is a requirement for success. And so as long as I know that, then I can continue to focus on failure as a sign of movement towards success. The truth is that we find what we're looking for, and I'm sure that you have people in your life that they always see the downside of things. They always see the bad side, and that's a choice. And so they're choosing to focus on the negative, and the problem with choosing the negative, we can't ignore the negative. If you ignore the negative, that's just foolhardy. If I ignore the fact that there's a car coming at me 60 miles an hour and ignore the fact that that's probably a bad thing, then I'm probably not going to get out of the way. But what I can do is, instead of focusing on that car, I can focus on getting out of the way, which is a good thing. And then after I get out of the way, I can go, wow, that was great. I'm alive. I survived what could have been a really bad situation. And so one of the things, and I talked about this in a previous video, is our stories. A lot of us tend to focus our thinking on things that come from our stories. And so growing up, I lived in foster homes growing up, and my mom was who I blamed for all my problems. My mom and my dad. I said, oh my God, my mom abandoned me. She left me in this house with these horrible people, and they mistreat me, and it's my mom, my mom, my mom. That was my story. And so I ended up in these really bad situations with women, because I would get into these relationships with women, and I would look at the relationship, and I would kind of bring the story about my mom into my relationship with these women. And then I did a lot of work on myself to figure out a new story. And the new story was that my mom cared about me, and she did the best she could to make sure that I had a good life, and she simply couldn't take care of me at the time. And when my story changed, my focus changed. So then when I started looking at women, I started looking at women differently, and I started looking at women as though, wow, these women are really caring, loving people that will even go to the extent that if they think their child can have a better life by giving them to someone else to take care of, they'll actually do that, which is huge, because most women are very, very connected to their moms. And my mom was very, very connected to me, and it was one of the most painful things that she ever did to give me up. I had a recent experience. My brother passed away a few months ago. And when he passed away, it was probably the most painful thing that ever happened to me in my life. I suffered for 3 or 4 days. I just was in miserable pain and cried all day and couldn't get up off the couch and didn't go to work, and just, I was a mess. And then I started thinking about my brother and what he would want for me. And I realized that what he would want for me was for his death to be a good thing. And so I thought, what are the good things that could come out of this? And the first one was that by him passing away, it helped me understand the value of my family to me even more than I already did. And since he's passed away, I've spent more time talking to my son, talking to my other brother, talking to my family members, and working on those relationships. My brother was an artist and a musician, and he left this whole huge database full of all this music and all these paintings. And I was thinking, he started painting because I painted. I was an artist in the late 70s, early 80s, and he started painting because I started painting. And I thought, wow, I could continue the legacy by going back and doing artwork again and honoring my brother's memory by doing that. So I found the good, because my goal in life is to focus on the good and not the bad. That doesn't mean that I don't still suffer and feel pain. I cried today a little bit thinking about my brother's passing, but I understand that his passing has helped me to be closer to other people. And so I just kind of want to leave this with you that, we're going to find what we're looking for. And if you're looking for solutions, and if you're looking for the good in the world and the silver lining, that's exactly what you'll find. And if you look for something else, that's what you'll find. And so my hope is that you'll think about what you are thinking about, and you'll guard your mind from your thoughts and try to shape your thoughts so that they will do things to your mind and help the physical part of your mind and that part of our mind that's who we are develop into something that's really out looking for good and that can do good for other people as a result. So I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next chat. Thanks, everyone.
Have a heart, have